Visit kfc.org/relevant. kfc.org/relevant.
She opens her home with joy. She sets the table with love. And when guests come by, she brews Guadalupe Gold coffee. Because for her, hospitality is holy, and every cup is more than coffee. It's a conversation starter, a source of peace, and a way to support Catholic coffee farmers and the mission of Relevant Radio.
Guadalupe Gold Coffee. Available now at relevantradio.com/store. That's relevantradio.com/store.
Hey, today we'd like to thank Donna, who's listening in Texas, for donating her 2009 Baymaster Bravo boat. You can join thousands of other listeners in donating old vehicles, trucks, boats, and RVs by visiting relevantradio.com/car. That's relevantradio.com/car.
The Drew Mariani Show on Relevant Radio.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Ed Morrissey at hotair.com, filling in for Drew Mariani. And, man, we really have to talk about the rise of anti-Semitism in America. It's really accelerated, I think, over the last 2 years with the Hamas attacks on Israel, just unleashing an incredible amount of hatred and vitriol on college campuses. But it's really gotten beyond college campuses, and I think it's important to try to figure out, A, where it's coming from, B, maybe the different places it's coming from as well, because I think we have to be honest that this is something that happens on the fringes of what we would consider both sides of the political spectrum. Always has been. But it does seem to be gaining more momentum on one particular side at the moment. And what that means, what does that mean for American policy? What does it mean for cities and states where this is really becoming prominent? What does it mean for us culturally and morally? I mean, it is, to me, a real sign of a moral decline in our country to have this type of hatred vented so vitriolically, and yet almost with some sort of semi-broad acceptance. And here to talk about that is Roy Schoeman. He's an adjunct professor of theology at Ave Maria University and at Holy Apostles Seminary, speaks frequently at Catholic parishes and conferences throughout the U.S., Canada, Europe, and South America. He's the author of Salvation is from the Jews, The Role of Judaism in Salvation History, and Honey from the Rock, 16 Jews Find the Sweetness of Christ. And you can find out more at salvationisfromthejews.com. Roy, thank you so much for being with us. And this is not an easy topic.
Oh, it's certainly not a pleasant topic.
No, it isn't. Let me give you my take on this, is that, this is something that I think I had sort of bubbled below the surface. I'm a political commentator, so I see things, I write about things, and I don't think I wrote a lot about this until after October 7th. And I think at the time when I saw this huge paroxysm of anti-Semitic hatred flowing out from college campuses, that same week, I said, I feel like I went to sleep in America and woke up in the film Cabaret in the Tomorrow Belongs to Me scene. And for those of you who've seen Cabaret, you understand what that is. It's a moment where you realize that the Nazi movement is really taking over Germany in this musical. It floored me how shocked I was. This would appear to be sudden. Now, I think, looking back with the perspective of what's been going on, I don't think it's sudden, but I do think it was accelerated greatly by the Hamas attacks on Israel.
Absolutely. It's horrifying. May I look at it from a slightly different angle, which is that you started the segment talking about the college campuses and the violently pro-Hamas, anti-Israel student demonstrations and so forth. But I can't help thinking the students involved and the 15 to 22-year-old or 30-year-old left-wingers who are waving, pre-Palestine banners, they're useful idiots. That's not where the energy for this is coming from. If you remember the demonstrations on college campuses, Harvard and Yale and so forth, the signs were professionally produced. Those tent cities sprang up. overnight with, identical tents and so forth. There was a lot of money behind this. There was a lot of organization behind this.
So I think you're right. I definitely want to get into that. I also, just to be clear, that people who are on the right have seen this on the fringe of the right for quite some time. We're still seeing some of that. It doesn't have the same energy, though. It really is more of the fringe, I think, and maybe that's just because of the nature of the political right at the moment, which is much more focused on populist type of things and that sort of thing.
Well, I'm not.
It exists on the fringe of both. It exists on the fringe of both sides. So I don't want to necessarily give the impression that this is strictly a progressive phenomenon, but I think it is much more mainstream now among the progressives than it is amongst even some of the what we would call maybe the isolationist conservatives or the neocons, if you will.
I was a little bit too telegraphic in that I didn't do a good job of expressing my thought, because my point isn't that the organization itself or the impetus behind this is coming from either the left or the right. I think it's coming from a third place that has channels into the left and channels into the right to manipulate and influence people and get them on board with this.
Oh, I think that's you're exactly right about that. And so let's explore this. I mean, I understand we're going to talk a little bit more later in the show about patriotism and the decline of patriotism and the role that academia plays in that. And I think that's pretty clear. It's separate from this discussion, but I think that there are mechanisms that are probably at least analogous or similar in both of these things. I would love to hear what you see where you see this coming from and what the mechanisms actually are.
So you're asking me to tell you where this is coming from and what the mechanisms are. I think that there are a couple of possibilities and they may be flowing together. I think one is clearly the influence of the, broadly speaking, the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is actually an organization which was founded at the turn of the 20th century or 1920s to subdue the global population to Islam. And we have lots of organizations in the United States that are allied with the Muslim Brotherhood, that are part of it. Hamas itself explicitly says it's a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood and so forth. So we have the Muslim Brotherhood, which is united in its Islamic determination to eradicate Judaism and destroy the influence of Jews and also destroy the country of Israel. Can talk about that if you want, why that should be like a number one goal of the Muslim Brotherhood, but that's clearly the case. I'm happy to talk about that for hours.
Well, I mean the link here too. I mean, there's plenty of links here, but the link here, one of the main links here is that Hamas is actually a child group of the Muslim Brotherhood. It started off as an offshoot of Muslim Brotherhood,
and it still is in the Constitution of Hamas. It proudly says we're a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. But you bring up another issue, which I think is very interesting too, which is, could there also be a kind of what's happened? We've had the last 15 years have been kind of dominated by the Trump, Biden, however you want to look at it, Obama, Trump, Biden, Trump dynamic. And so we have this kind of MAGA movement. And I think that people who want to destroy MAGA are also behind this, because this is a great wedge to help cripple MAGA.
Oh, that's interesting. How do you see that? I mean, I think that's interesting. I think that it's. I think we're seeing people who are trying to maybe push in that direction. And is that the Muslim Brotherhood? Do you think that the money is flowing from the Muslim Brotherhood or flowing from Qatar, which is there's a tremendous amount of influence that Qatar exerts in the United States through university grants, and we can talk about China too, but that's a separate issue too. It's some similar type of problem, but on a different different topic, not anti-Semitism so much. And I mean, I think that one of the least discussed parts of this problem has been the influx of money into the United States, not just in academia, but primarily through academia, to push that influence as broadly as possible, to undermine American values, to undermine American ties to Israel very clearly, but also I think to undermine Western values and to sort of create a nihilistic movement that will, at the very least, impede the United States in the long run.
Absolutely, and knock the United States off the throne of being the world superpower. I couldn't agree more. There's another, just to throw another onion into the stew. There's also the question of the entire Soros network apparently being behind this. The same organizational ability that organized the Black Lives Matter to some extent, that organized riots every few years, Occupy Wall Street, and so forth. That organizational ability seems to have been behind the campus organization of the anti-Israel and Gaza movement, too. Those are strange bedfellows.
Yeah, and there's a larger organization, too, called Arabella, where a lot of that money flows through. And the name of the author now escapes me, unfortunately. He wrote a book about this a few months ago, which is a large collection of billionaire money on the left is being used to create what he was calling micro movements, right? Where a lot of opacity, not much transparency about where the money was flowing through. There was storefronts, I think was the term that he used. Little storefront organizations that would pop up for specific things like the agitation on campuses that we've seen. And again, we're speaking again with Roy Schoeman and taking your calls at 888-914-9149. And across a whole bunch of different things. But I really want to talk about anti-Semitism. We know what the Muslim Brotherhood wants to do with Jews, but I'm curious as to why it seems to be getting so much purchase now. I mean, this is something that's been going on in the United States. First off, anti-Semitism is going on for thousands of years. It's like the world's first bigotry. So, but why now? Why at this moment? Why do you see this being the crisis moment where this is really just erupting out into the open?
Well, first of all, I think it's largely engineered, so it's not entirely, it's more astroturf than grassroots. But also, I do have a kind of a background in theology, and I do teach theology, and Salvation is from the Jews is about the theology of Judaism. So you'll have to forgive me for being a little bit theological, but I don't think there's certainly no doubt in my mind that the ultimate roots of anti-Semitism is a satanic hatred of the Jews coming straight from hell. Because, of course, the Jews brought about the coming of Christ. The Jews brought about the defeat of Satan. And so I think that the inexplicable persistence and vehemence of anti-Semitism stems from basically diabolical influence over society. And we've never had as large a diabolical influence over society as we have today. If you go back to the beginning of humanity, and if you certainly go back to the Old Testament, the two practices that fueled the power of Satan over human society was child sacrifice and sexual depravity. And you hardly have had any time in history where those two problems have been more prevalent than they are today. And that's basically, in my mind, the gasoline that fuels the engine.
We are speaking with Roy Schoeman. He's adjunct professor of theology at Ave Maria University at Holy Apostles Seminary. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to continue the conversation about anti-Semitism, its nature, and maybe what we as people of faith should be doing about it. I'd like to talk a little bit about that as well. And taking your calls at 888-914-9149, 888-914-9149. I'm Ed Morrissey, filling in for Drew Mariani. We'll be right back.
The Drew Mariani Show on Relevant Radio. The Chaplet of Divine Mercy begins soon on Relevant Radio.
Welcome back. This is Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com, filling in for Drew Mariani, taking your calls at 888-914-9149. By the way, I haven't been back here in a bit, but I just discovered today that Relevant Radio Plus is now available, completely free video platform. You can visually immerse yourself in the Holy Mass, Divine Mercy Chaplet, Family Rosary across America like never before. Live or on-demand, Relevant Radio Plus brings your faith in our most popular programs to life right in your living room with zero ad interruptions. You can get this on your smart TV, Roku, Apple TV, Fire TV. I've got a Fire Stick. I'm going to be looking to add this here real quickly. Relevant Radio Plus. So you can go to relevantradio.com/plus, Plus, and you can find out more, find out how to get it loaded up on your device, and you'll have your Relevant Radio Plus channel there for audio and visual enlightenment. And it's great news, and glad to see that it is now launched. We are speaking with Roy Schoeman. He's an adjunct professor of theology at Ave Maria University at Holy Apostles Seminary, and author of Salvation is from the Jews, the Role of Judaism in Salvation History. And we're talking about the sharp rise in anti-Semitism, and in the way that Jewish people here in the United States seem to be being targeted for intimidation and worse, not just on college campuses either, but in many different walks of life. And Roy, I want to ask you this, because you hear this a lot, which is that, well, they're only really criticizing Israel. They're only really criticizing the government of Israel. They're not attacking the Jews. And first up, I would argue back that that's literally not true. If you watch some of these college campuses, they were chasing Jewish students all over the campus, and worse sometimes. But this is a distinction in practice. This is a distinction without a difference. I mean, you can certainly criticize the judicial policy or whatever it was that the Likud wanted to do in Israel regarding reforming the judiciary there. That would be criticizing government policy. But this is about the legitimacy of a homeland for Jews, and worse. I would say it actually goes beyond that. But what do you say when people say that, oh, well, no, this is just it's not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel?
I think that's a useful defense, but I think it's nonsense. I mean, you had those two nurses in Australia who were busted for one of them boasting of having killed a number of Jews while he was, their nurse in the hospital, and the other one talking about, that she would if she could. These are Jews, as you point out, on the college campuses. Jewish professors couldn't go into their classrooms, and Jewish students couldn't even go on campus and stuff. And they weren't Israelis, and they weren't IDF soldiers. They were just Jews. And the problem was that they were Jews. And in Europe, you have attacks on the street. I remember the French domestic minister, I forgot the name of his title, told the Jews, well, you don't wear any signs of Jewish identity when you're in public in France. That's the solution to being attacked for being a Jew on the street. So it's just not true. I think that there is I mentioned a little earlier in the show, this issue of the Muslim Brotherhood and this Islamic animosity towards Jews and Judaism. And I think here you can perhaps separate the two, and perhaps in the West, in the intellectual context, the Greta Thunbergs of the world, their hostility might be more directed towards Israel and Israel's activities. But in the part of the world where the behavior is stemming from the dictates of Islam, there I see almost no dividing line between Jew and Israeli, or basically between Jew and being the enemy, period. And there you have to go back to the days of Muhammad, because Muhammad's first battles were exterminating Jewish tribes. And according to Islam, he was actually died as a result of being poisoned by a Jewish woman. And there are lots of quotes in Islam about Jews being the worst of people. I mean, there are quotes in the Quran and there are quotes in the sayings of Muhammad and Muhammad's life, which was written shortly thereafter, about Jews being the worst of people, and even that the second coming won't happen, the day of resurrection won't happen until all the Jews are killed. So, you know, they're front row and center in Islam as being the ultimate enemy. And then you have the influence over various societies in the West being more and more influenced by Islam. And the connection is inescapable.
Again, we're speaking with Roy Showman, taking your calls at 888-914-9149. Let's go to the phones. Mike in Minneapolis, Minnesota would like to join the conversation. Great to have you, Mike.
Hi, yeah, I'm a Protestant that enjoys listening to this radio station. I'm
Thank
just
you.
wondering what the official Catholic teaching is. The Catechism says about, like, the Book of Revelation, where it talks about the Israelites, the church, and like the verse, I think there's a verse in Mark or Luke where it talks about the time of the Gentiles coming to an end. I'm, like I said, I'm Protestant, and I tend to be more empathetic to Israel and the Jews than a lot of other denominations. I'm just wondering what the official Catholic teaching is.
Well,
They teach that the church replaced the Jews.
We have the right man for you, Mike.
Well,
Thank you for your call.
thanks.
Roy, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks. Somebody teed up that ball right on top of this 4-inch tee. Paragraph 674 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church says, quote, "The glorious Messiah's coming is suspended at every moment of history until his recognition by all Israel." So that's a dogmatic statement in the New Catechism. The glorious Messiah's coming is suspended at every moment of history until his recognition by all Israel. And if anyone wants to not trust me, it is paragraph 674. So it's official church teaching that the second coming can't happen until there is a widespread conversion of the Jews. And as you correctly point out, this is based on Romans 11, actually, is where the verse is, "Lest you be wise in your own conceits, brethren, I want you to understand this mystery. A hardening has come upon part of Israel until the full number of the Gentiles come in, and then all Israel will be saved." So that it is Catholic teaching also that there has to be a large-scale conversion of the Jews for the second coming to happen, that that's part of God's plan of salvation. And in matter of fact, in that Romans 11, St. Paul describes very beautifully how God, in this kind of cosmic poetry of salvation, revealed himself first to the Jews, and through the Jews revealed himself to the Gentiles, with the intention of then essentially revealing himself to the Gentiles and the Jews still being kept in the dark until, as the Jews brought Christ to the Gentiles are to bring Christ to the Jews through the evangelization of the Jews and through praying for their conversion. And this is St. Paul. This is St. Paul, Romans chapter 11, verses 25 to the end. So that's 100% kosher Catholic teaching. The other half of your question was what's known as replacement theology or supersessionism. And that is, there isn't really an unambiguous dogmatic teaching from the church on that, on whether the promises made to Israel have now all gone into the church and there is no promise left to Israel, or whether the whole world has been brought into the promises made to Israel. But again, the Vatican II documents, Nostra Aetate, said pretty firmly that it quotes that same line from Romans 11, or the same passage, that as regards the gospel, they are enemies of God for your sake, but as regards election, they are still beloved for the sake of their forefathers, for the gifts and the call of God are irrevocable. So there certainly is a very strong suggestion that was quoted numerous times by John Paul II and by Benedict and again in Vatican II. So there's a strong suggestion that although salvation through Judaism ceased to exist at the time of Christ, there's no question about that. That can't be argued, that the salvific value of Judaism that it had as a sacramental religion in the Old Testament has gone away. Nonetheless, the election of the Jews still somehow continues.
it's interesting too. I mean, this is. I think that there's been a great deal of effort by the church to combat the very thing that we were talking about, right? The anti-Semitic trends throughout history, and there was some recognition of the church's role in that. There's been also some recognition that it's part of our work to try to build bridges there, if for no other reason, and certainly the main reason being evangelization, but also because this is where our salvation did come from. I'm curious as to where you see the church today putting this, and we got maybe like 30 seconds. What's the church today doing to work towards that?
Well, they're doing a lot to work against anti-Semitism, and all of the documents that have come and all of the statements of popes that have come since Vatican II have spoken that very strongly. I don't think they're doing as much as I would like to see them evangelizing the Jews, which is why I have my ministry and why I wrote my book and everything, is that there is an incorrect view that somehow it's unfair to Jews to evangelize them, when in fact, how can it be unfair to Jews to bring them to Christ, who they brought to the rest of the world? There's no greater gift to anyone than to be brought to Christ, and that includes the Jews. So I think the church perhaps is a little too shy about that.
Roy Showman, that's all that we have time for. Thank you so much for your insight. Don't forget to read Salvation is from the Jews, the Role of Judaism in Salvation History. Coming up.
Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks. That was a lot of fun. Thanks a lot. Thank Ed for me.
I will indeed. Thank you, sir.
God bless. Bye.